Shooting a flintlock smoothbore musket is pure fun. Recreating its original cartridges and its original ballistics is even more fun and contributes a lot to understanding contemporary tactics. And that's how we arrive to experimental archaeology. So this part of the series is dedicated solely to the US Model 1822 flintlock musket and its cartridges.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Capandball here, your favorite gun channel in beautiful bright English language. And today we are going to take a short break in the series about the Mississippi rifle just to stop for some musketry. This is the musket that I was shooting in the previous chapter of this video. I was comparing the rate of fire and the accuracy of the rifle and the musket. This is a model 1821 or 22 US musket made in Harper's Ferry. It's an original piece. And today I'm going to cover two topics about it. The first topic is the ballistics. We are going to see what kind of trajectory this musket ball had and what kind of velocity, kinetic energy it had. And in the second part, I'm going to cover how to make proper authentic cartridges for your musket. So when you want to make a proper ballistics reconstruction of the original trajectory of a bullet, it is not just enough to substitute the original powder charge with modern powder charge, because even if the grain size, the cone size is the same, there can be differences in the gas pressure it generates, and then you will have differences in the muzzle velocity also. This is caused by the different manufacturing method, the different quality of the ingredients, the different mixing ratio, so anything can have an effect on the force of the powder. Which means that if you want to make a proper reconstruction, even if you have the original projectile, a perfect copy, you have an original gun or a very good repro that is completely representing the specifications of the original gun, you still have to understand the original muzzle velocity of the bullet fired from that gun. But before we continue, let me ask for your support. Your donations on Patreon are vital for keeping the quality of the channel high. Here you will find exclusive content from me. We are also present on the History of Weapons and War platform that is an excellent hiding place for gun nuts like us. There are thousands of videos from educational channels creators, so it's well worth being a member of that platform as well. So please like, share, comment, subscribe and help us grow, because the engine will not help us grow. It is up to you. So thank you very much, guys. The velocity of projectiles in the 19th century was measured by ballistics pendulum. The ballistics pendulum was invented by a British man called Benjamin Robbins, and he wrote a paper in 1742 titled The New Principles of Gunnery, where he describes a method using a ballistics pendulum to measure the velocity of this projectile, the musket ball. And the method is quite simple. The bullet is fired into the bullet catch of the pendulum. It transfers its momentum to the bob, and the velocity is calculated by the amplitude of the pendulum swing. It's quite easy and it's quite accurate. This method was introduced in the US by a young engineer-minded officer called Alfred Mordecai. He was the chief of Ordnance, and he was responsible for modernizing the equipment of the army in the 1840s. Alfred Mordecai graduated from West Point in 1825, and he started working as an assistant engineer on various fortifications. From 1833 he was serving for the Ordnance, and he made several trips to Europe to bring back as much experience as possible to the United States. From 1839 he was member of the Ordnance Board. As a part of a military commission, he visited Europe at the end of the 1830s. They visited the most important arsenals, the most important manufacturing centers for firearms. And this trip actually contributed a lot to publishing the first ever Ordnance Manual of the US Army, the 1841 edition. The first Ordnance Manual that included information about the initial velocity of a musket ball like this was the second edition from 1850. According to this edition, the muzzle velocity of a 65 caliber musket ball fired with 110 grains of musket powder was 1,500 feet per sec. This data is based on trials that were carried out in the Washington Arsenal in 1843-44, led by Alfred Mordecai. Alfred Mordecai by that time was the assistant inspector for all the state-owned arsenals, and he wrote a report about these trials in 1845, published in Washington, and it is freely accessible on the internet. The trial focused on both small arms projectiles and also on artillery projectiles, and they made quite a few modifications to the cartridges according to these experiences. In case of the smoothbore musket, the diameter of the ball was increased from 64 caliber to 65 caliber, while the powder charge of the cartridge was reduced from 130 to 110 grains of musket powder. The reason for this reduction for the powder charge was caused by two reasons. The first one is this was the decade when the transformation to the percussion ignition started, which means that 10 grains that was used for priming the pen was not necessary in the cartridge anymore. That is 10 grains of reduction. The other 10 grains of reduction was possible to reach the same muzzle velocity, of course, because the bullet was larger, which means the fit was tighter and it better sealed the powder gases. According to these trials, 120 grains of musket powder propelled the 64 caliber ball to 1484 feet per secondum velocity, while the 110 grains propelled the 65 caliber musket ball to 1508 feet per secondum. So it was even better with less powder charge. The increment of the projectile diameter raised the question of loadability, because the more you shoot your musket, the more fouling will build up on the bore, which means your bullet will be harder to ram down from shot to shot. To test this issue, first they selected two muskets with really tight bores. The original caliber was 69, but the two trial rifles or two trial muskets were with the caliber of 0.688 and 0.687. So they were much tighter than the original military service caliber. And they fired these muskets 1,000 times, and they realized that even after shooting 200 shots with a musket and cleaning them only after 200 shots, the musket is still loadable, which means that it was perfect for service. So the Ordnance Manual of 1850, the second edition, only described cartridges for the percussion arms, because they supposed that the transition from flintlock to percussion will be only a few years. But in fact it was much longer, because we know that at the beginning of the Civil War there were units that were still armed with smoothbore flintlock muskets, and they used the same cartridges as the percussion arms. So we can be sure that the muzzle velocity of the flintlock muskets fired in the American Civil War had a lower muzzle velocity than what was written in the Ordnance Manual, because out of the 110 grains of musket powder, a 10 grain charge was still had to be used for priming the pen. But let's start that ballistic experiment now. So we have the proper size ball, we have a musket, and now we only have to set the charge. I start with 120 grains of powder. .305. Slow as hell.
This is only 1000 feet per secondum, only 2/3 of what we need. This was the first shot with the musket that day, which means this was the oil shot, but we need to increase the powder charge for sure. I increased the charge to 140 grains of 1.5 F Swiss powder.
.491.
Let's do another with the same charge. The last one was 484, a bit too much.
To reach the desired 1508 feet per secondum or 460 meters per secondum, I had to reduce that charge to 130 grains of 1.5 F Swiss powder. Now, from ballistics wise, this is the good equivalent of the original 110 grains of musket powder, which means that the US musket powder was actually hotter than the Swiss 1.5 F powder. Now this is quite interesting. Let's see now what data we need for a ballistics reconstruction or theoretical ballistic simulation using a ballistics software called Quick Target. We need the diameter of the ball, which is 65 caliber. We need the weight of the ball, which is 407 grains. We need the muzzle velocity of the ball, which is 460 meters per secondum or 1508 feet per secondum. And we also need the ballistic coefficient of this ball. This is a unique number that describes its shape, how it is resistant to the effect of the air. And this number is actually calculated. It is calculated from measuring the velocity of this bullet at two distances.
Let's check the energy and velocity graph first. The initial velocity of the bullet is 460 meters per secondum with a kinetic energy of 2790 joules. Round ball has an inferior ballistics form compared to modern bullets, but the kinetic energy is still above 100 joules at a distance of 870 meters or 950 yards, meaning it can still wound a soft target. Let's check now how the trajectory covers the field in front of the soldier. According to the contemporary tactics, the maximum range for musket fire was around 300 paces or 225 meters or 246 yards. This will be my 0 point. The gray area above and below the line of sight marks a range of plus-minus 50 centimeter, resulting in a 1 meter high vital target area, approximately the height of a human torso. From the graph, it is clear that the bullet path, in ideal circumstances and with proper aiming, can nearly fully cover this field. The peak of trajectory is at 120 meters with a 60 centimeter elevation, meaning that the soldier had to aim quite low, to the belly of the enemy soldier, to be able to score a hit at this distance. But all in all, the trajectory matches the requirements of the contemporary tactics.
Using this ballistic software, we can also calculate the maximum range of this bullet. Well, if you fire your musket in an ideal angle of 30.1 degrees, it will push this ball to 1,393 meters. That equals to around 0.86 miles. That's a large distance. But don't forget that these are ideal numbers. The muzzle velocity of a musket could vary largely, because even if the 65 caliber is tighter fitter than the 64 caliber ball, it is still quite loose in the bore, which means that the seal of the system can be completely different from shot to shot. So let's go now to the cartridge part. So the musket actually had 4 kinds of cartridges. The first one was a blank cartridge for saluting and for training. The second one was a single ball cartridge. The third one was the capandball cartridge, containing 1 single ball and 3 30 caliber buckshots. And the fourth one was a buckshot cartridge containing 12 30 caliber buckshots. So let's make single ball and capandball cartridges for a musket. For reference, I use the 1850 edition, the second edition of the Ordnance Manual, because I'm concentrating in the time when the Mississippi rifles were serving together with the flintlock muskets, which means that I'm going to use the 110 grains of musket powder charge and the 65 caliber round ball. This will be quite interesting because, as I mentioned to you before, there was a great change in the cartridge construction from 1841 to 1850.
The trapezoids of the cartridge were cut from 13 by 16.5 inch size sheets of laboratory paper. One sheet gave 12 trapezoids with 4.33 inch height, 5.25 long side and 3 inch short side. The weight of a 1000 sheet bundle of this paper was 20 pounds. Quality of the paper was important, as the durability and accuracy of the cartridge depended on the paper. Therefore it was well sized, smooth, strong and even thickness. When a bundle of 1000 sheets was pressed, the thickness had to be 4 inches. The trapezoid was rolled on a former matching the diameter of the ball. One end was convex, the other end was concave to accept a part of the ball when forming the paper cylinder. It was made from hard wood. Leave half an inch of space above the ball to allow space for choking. Choke the case fully above the ball and gently below the ball. The projecting end was closed with a half hitch, and the same twine secured the ball as well, closed with 2 half hitches. Both Ordnance Manuals describe the sizes of measures to be used for musket cartridges. The upper one is made according to the 1841 manual. The below one is made based on the 1850 edition. This later one measured 110 grains of powder. The musket cartridges were charged with musket powder mixed from 76 parts of saltpeter, 14 parts of charcoal, and 10 parts of sulfur. The granulation of this powder was considered coarse. The minimum grain size was 0.05 and the maximum was 0.07 inches. This corresponds to approximately 1 F granulation today. The charge in my case is 110 grains of musket powder and a 65 caliber musket ball. The cartridge paper was not waterproofed and there was no lubrication on the cartridge.
Let's check now the buck and ball cartridges.
The buck and ball cartridges had a devastating short-range effect. They contained a single ball and 3 30 caliber buckshot. The construction of the buck and ball cartridge was very similar to the single ball cartridges. The trapezoid and the powder charge were the same, but the cartridge was choked and tied 3 times: over the buckshot, between the buckshot and the ball, and under the ball. In the 1850s, a bundle of 10 single-bore cartridges and a pack of 12 percussion caps measured 2.6 by 3.1 by 1.35 inches, while the buck-and-bore cartridges bundle measured 2.9 by 3.1 by 1.35 inches. The wrapping paper's quality was not as important as in the case of the cartridge paper, but it was waterproofed with a varnish made from beeswax, spirits of turpentine, and linseed oil. Ball cartridges were packed in wooden crates holding 1,000 cartridges. The crate for the musket cartridges measured 6.75 by 15.5 by 11.75 inches. They were painted olive color, lined with waterproof paper, and they were marked on both ends with the number and type of cartridges inside. In the inside, the place and date of production was marked. According to the Ordnance Manual, a 19-man group supervised by a master, 10 to roll the cylinders, 1 to fill them, 4 to fold and 4 to bundle, was able to make 10,000 cartridges during a 10-hour shift. The manual suggested to use boys aged 12 to 18 for these jobs. The construction of the buck-and-bore cartridge was very similar. It was made from the same paper sheet, it contained the same 110 grain charge, a 65 caliber round ball, and 3 30 caliber buckshots.
So ladies and gentlemen, I really hope that you enjoyed this little time travel again. You've been watching the Capandball YouTube channel. If you like what I do, then please subscribe, like, share, comment, because this will help the channel to grow, because the algorithm won't let us grow. So I need your help. Ladies and gentlemen, if you wish and you can, please support us through patreon.com/capandball. Here you will find exclusive content from me. We are also present on the History of Weapons and War platform, a beautiful place for gun nuts, all about historical guns. It's a really good source of information. So ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay cool and keep your powder dry. And in the next chapter, I'm going to shoot the musket and the rifle to 100 meters distance to compare their effect. That will be interesting as well, I guess.